Okay, well, I'm going to talk about ProXist today. I'm going basically to do 2 or 3 things. First of all, I'm going to explain a bit what it is. Second, I'm going to do a demo. And third, I'm going to discuss why everything isn't there yet, sort of conclusion kind of thing. So, what is ProXist? Well, obviously it's the eXist implementation of ProX. That's not very helpful, is it? It's actually an XML-based abstraction layer around XProc pipelines. Rather than telling what it is, let me tell you why, what it does, sort of thing. It attempts to describe processes, the processes around XProc pipelines. Formally, it's a definition language, simply it's a relaxing schema. And if you think of a system, a document management system, and you have XML stored in there, and you process that XML, you publish it in various ways to print, web, whatever. You create reports, you analyze your XML, that sort of thing. All those things, to me, are processes. And all those processes can run one or more pipelines, in my case, XProc pipelines. And all of those pipelines can be configured in various ways. You can pass bindings into them. You can feed them with XSLT parameters. And obviously, you can tell which XSLT to use, or which XSLTs. So it's a language that basically defines all this for a system. I tend to think of the main ProX document as a blueprint, because if you have that system, you have a number of processes with this, and they all do different things. You could have something like a print process up there, or the web publishing process, and some kind of content validation and analysis process. Those are all of the processes this particular system is capable of doing right now, because that's what's defined. Now, every such process can then run one or more defined pipelines, and every one of those can be configured in a number of ways, because obviously you can't configure everything right away when writing this. So you have to let the user decide. And so the idea is basically this. The user, the end user, selects a process. I want to print publish something. I want to use the PDF generation pipeline. And I want to use something I call an informal internal template. It's just a layout thing with parameters and stuff set so the document looks informal. And what you get is an instance of this blueprint. This particular instance is fully configured to run this particular process, this particular pipeline, and this particular configuration, all selected by the user, okay? And the thing here is, why did I do this? Well, I showed this demo at Balisage last year. And what this thing is, it's an XForm that takes the ProX blueprint, the list with everything this system is allowed to do in terms of processing. And it displays the alternatives in this rather simple XForm and allows the user to choose among the alternatives. And when done, the user will save this. And behind the system, scenes in the system, the instance that was created was then converted to a shell script. And that shell script ran the actual pipeline, ran the process, the I call it the child process, because this is sort of a parent or a wrapper. Okay? And so this is what it did, and it did with some pain, because I mean it was ugly and it was still on a file system and everything was static. And so what I wanted to do was to put all this in eXist and, you know, make it a bit more dynamic and a bit more refined. So ProXist, yes, it is an eXist implementation of this ProX thing. And I'll show you very shortly what it does. So I'm going to run a demo using this as input, and you still haven't seen any angle brackets, sorry about that. But this is a modularized XML document. It's a couple of sections linked to a root document. There's some subsections, there's some images, and that's it. Nothing very fancy, but when I want to publish this thing, when I want to process it, that's the root XML is what I point out. This is the one I want, and the system will have to figure out the rest. Okay? As for output, well, there's going to be HTML. There's going to be PDF, and then I'm going to define a new pipeline, new packages to use, and output that, well, hopefully. And because of the strange ways of the GNOME interface, I will turn my back to you every now and then, so I can see what's actually going on there, because it doesn't mirror the way I want it to. Hope it's okay. So, demo number 1, HTML. Let's see. Now, here's the eXist interface. I've done this little web app. Whoops. And as you can see, there's an XForm, sort of a little bit fancier than the last one at Balisage, not very much really. This thing here selects the input XML, and since there are quite a few documents here, I did a couple of filters to filter out stuff that I don't want to glance over. So I pointed out the root document, right? And the first thing whoops, this is more difficult than it looks. I generated what I call a resource map. It's just a big XML that lists all this XML, all the modules, but also the pipelines I want to use, the XSLT I want to use, the X queries, etc., everything. It's just a lookup file for later processing. I'll show you what it looks like very shortly. And by the way, the dialog is simply a means for me to not connect these two parts, because I didn't really figure out how to do that properly. Here, as you can see, there's web print publishing, and if I click here, I can select other things. There's also a content validation option with a cross-reference check pipeline that I'm not going to show today. So let's run the web publishing thing. There aren't all that many configuration options because this is just a demo. So what I'll do now is to save the instance and run the conversion process. And ta-da! Impressive, isn't it? I know, converting to HTML is heavy stuff. Anyway, let me show a little bit about what it looks like behind the scenes. And this is far easier. First of all, let's have a look at the blueprint. just double click there. It's basically, there's a wrapper processes element. And as you can see, there are 3 process elements. I'm going to show the last one, the content validation, because it's basically shortest. First of all, there's some metadata. There's a title, and there's a description. And both title and description I use in the XForm. So I just get them from this document and display them to the user. The description is a sort of a help text. Then there's a pipeline structure. The actual pipeline definition here, again, there's metadata because it's used by the XForm. There's a link to the actual XProc script, and you'll notice that, I don't know if you can see this really well, but it's a URN, and the reason for that is simply that the system with which I created this is URN-based, so everything has a URN when linking, and then we're converting those to URLs at runtime. Okay? So I just kept those because I need to process this thing anyway. Very reactive mouse. Sorry about that. It's an extremely reactive mouse. There's a type attribute here that says that it's a package. So different kinds of links in this system, basically. And this is a package kind of thing. It simply means that later there's a package structure, again, metadata, and a link to the actual file, in this case, an XProc. Going back up, there's a command line part that simply lists every available option that I want to allow the users to potentially change. So it doesn't have to be everything here in the blueprint, only the stuff that I want the user to be able to change. There's some inputs required by this XProc, such as the input here. It's external, it means that it's determined at runtime. It's not known when writing the blueprint. And there's a style sheet input, and it's known. And there are 2 options. This is the actual output. And there's a debugging thing. I don't know if this is used, actually. I don't think so. But there's some problems with the Calabash module because it only accepts sequences, so I have some very ugly fixes in place right now. Looking at the resource map that is generated, let's see, well, it's basically a long list of resources, and you'll see that here are the URNs, and these are the current URLs. So I simply use this file to get data. Right. So going back to the, whoops, I don't know what happened there. Oh, there we are. So what happened here behind the scenes is that I generated a resource map, basically a big list of files. I got this ProX instance, the document that describes this specific process. And then I used the instance, converted the instance. I did some manipulation to it to replace stuff with runtime values and that sort of thing, all from the resource map. And then I converted it to an X query and ran that X query and returned the results. So this one simply generates the list and selects the input. And here I use the blueprint to give the process, to give the user the options to choose from. And this one basically saves the ProX instance and runs an XProc, a Wrapper XProc process that does all the rest. I'll show you in a second now. The save X query that initiates the process. First of all, it just saves the instance somewhere in a temp map. Then it runs this XProc that basically updates the ProX instance with runtime values if missing, such as the target names. You want to name your target, you want to name your input, that sort of thing. Replaces URNs with URLs if necessary. Generates the X query that runs the actual child process. And, runs the process, returning the results. So if we look at what happened in eXist, all this I did in this collection here. Here's the one that I actually used. This is basically an X query that runs the Calabash module using various bindings required. They're all described in the ProX blueprint and selected by the users, unknowingly. And eventually this thing is run. Let's do another one, shall we? PDF is always exciting. And it's basically the same, really. Sorry. I'll have to do this and this. Demo generated the map, and PDF is already selected. It takes a few seconds, but it turned out okay. Ta-da! And again, this is just some very small child pipelines running, but they configured using this ProXist thing. So if you look at what actually happened, what happened in addition to the last pipeline is that since the result returned from the child process was FO, is an XML document using FO, I had to use renderX to generate the PDF using the X query. So it just checks what the root element is. Oh, this is FO, fine, I'll run it. And the reason for this is that right now the XSL formatter step doesn't work with the Calabash module for eXist. For some reason, there's something that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Right. Well, let me show one last bit then, because these were all predefined processes. For all you know, I may have been up all night doing this, so perhaps it's very hard to do this. Well, all you have to do, if you have the, you do need to still write your pipelines and your XSLT and whatever you need, but once you've done that, all you have to do is to do this pipeline definition. In this case, I want to add it to the content validation process, not add another new process. I'm going to put it in the existing one. And I need to define the packages used by this pipeline. So let's do that. probably going to be a bit painful again. Yep. I've prepared some stuff here. Here's a package document for the XProc I want to use. So let's copy that. You'll notice that I've prepared comments. Let's put it there. And you'll see that this is, again, it's just a link to the actual file, but there's an abstraction layer because I don't want to point at the file directly. For one thing, this thing allows me to group a number of related files and define them as a package. Let's get the here's a package that defines the XSLT. So let's paste it there as well. And all we need now is to insert the pipeline definition. And I've prepared one as well. It's by far the biggest, obviously. There's a actual pipeline definition, a link to the package, pipeline package. There's some metadata I want to appear in the XForm. And all these are the defined input bindings. There's a normalizing style sheet here. Norm. So let's paste this. There we are. Save that and go back to where's the browser? Oh, running tools. Now, probably I might need to empty the cache here, but let's try this. Root. Prague. Oops, sorry. There. And there it is. And what this thing does is run another XProc to convert this to a mind map. And unfortunately, I can't open the mind map in the browser. Sorry, I don't know how to do that. But I think you get the point. I could actually download it, though. So, this was sort of simple. And by the way, I'm not saying that you have to write these by hand. If you don't want to, you can set up an Oxygen environment, because obviously there are some things to remember, use IDs and stuff to identify the bindings and the values, and there's some tricks you have to do to identify the proper values and that sort of thing. Is all in the DTD, in the relaxing schema. And I don't really have the time to go into those now. But there is some future work to be done. First of all, the web app is still very crude, with all kinds of ugliness in the X query, in part because I'm a rubbish programmer, but also because I had to do some shortcuts because the Calabash module doesn't do everything I want it to. For instance, you'll notice that I couldn't actually feed any parameters to the child process. That's because right now feeding parameters via the module doesn't work. Documentation is very important. I can't hardly remember this thing myself. And this the XQuery wrapper, the save XQuery. Right now it checks the content of the XML that is returned to find out what kind of XML it is, and it's really ugly. And it shouldn't be necessary because all that should be done by the child process. The Wrapper XQuery shouldn't have to care about this. So I'd really like to go back to a more pure XProc here, because I've been forced to solve things using XQueries, and the parent XQuery doesn't have access to the resource map I generate, so it can't name the output files properly. Oh, well, I'm almost done, but huge thanks must go to Jim Fuller and Norm Walsh because of the work they've done. I certainly wouldn't stand here without them. And obviously the Wikibooks community for, well, giving me a non-programmer the means to do some of this myself. And this is all on GitHub, so if you want to take a look, you can, and please do. But without the documentation, I sort of doubt that you'll be able to make this work easily. And with that, thank you for your time.
Right, we have time for a few questions. Anyone have a question? Question? Right, oh, right here.
Hello, very interesting. So you demoed several steps, well, several processes where you could provide an XML document as input. Can you also provide some other things like options or non-XML documents?
As input, you mean? I'm not sure what you mean there, actually. Could you?
Aren't some of your packages, there are images and other things?
Oh, right,
yes.
yeah. You could actually provide anything the style sheet or whatever using them allows. So those are not passed. They're just, they're defined as packages, and everything is basically allowed because I assume that the child process will be able to handle them, and it's up to the child process to do it.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Right, thank you very much, Ari. Thank you.